of what is straining our nation at its core right now is that idea is lost. They don't think they work for us anymore. But biblically, they have only the authority. They have authority that comes from two sources. That comes from me, that I invest in them, or what comes from God's Word, that He directly says, I'm going to give government the authority to bear the sword. But unless I give it to them or God gives it to them, the Declaration of Independence says they do not have it. Government, and this leads us to another critical understanding. And I know I keep using this word critical, but I try to get down to the basis of things that I think we have to understand. As a result of government having only the authority that we give to them, the only thing then that government is allowed to do are those things which God's Word tells me I am allowed to do. And let me give you an example. I go out one day, I've got neighbors on either side of me. I notice this guy's got one car and this guy's got two. People coming and going, we're going. One night, we see the guy next door. I mean, he's got the hood up on the car, it's sitting up on blocks, and he's walking up and down the street to the bus stop. And I say, man, what happened to your car? Well, it broke down. So I say, well, listen, this guy over here, he's got two cars. I'm going to go over and ask him to give you one of his cars. Now, do I have the right to do that? He might go and say, hey, listen, the guy next door, he's a good guy, he ain't got a car, why don't you go give it to him? And he says, I'm not going to, I need it. It's mine, I work for it, it's my property. So I wait, and I go out, this is terrible. So I go out in the middle of the night, I hot wire my neighbor's car, and I drive it over and put it in this guy's car and said, hey, here, this is your car. Do I have the authority to do that? No. Does government have the authority to do that? No. That's why we have to understand that government can only do those things which God allows the individual to do, because the only authority that they have is the authority that we are allowed to invest in them. So when you look at political issues, here's an easy test to decide if it's a good idea or not. If you wouldn't be allowed to do it, neither should they. It's that simple. Now, our founding fathers wrote copiously about equal rights, not equal results. And unfortunately, we have lost that understanding in a very big way. The phrase, the pursuit of happiness, has been stretched completely out of what it meant. We think of happiness as an emotion. No stress, things are going good, I won the lottery, or, I found a lottery ticket in my backyard. I didn't even buy it, Pastor. I found it in the backyard, and I won the lottery. I'm feeling happy. Happiness is that emotion that comes from what happens to you. But in their thinking, it had a much deeper meaning. The pursuit of happiness was really this concept. You have the right to pursue what happens to you. You have the right to direct your own life. It's not like Europe when you're 12 years old and you get, you take a test and they tell you, hey, listen, you ain't smart enough to go to college. You need to go down and do this trade or that trade or the other. Our founding fathers said, you have the right, if you've got to take math 6 times to get a college degree, hey, have at it. That was what the pursuit of happiness was. The pursuit of directing what happens in your life. Originally, the phrase was property of conscience. Life, liberty, and property of conscience. Benjamin Franklin felt that was too narrow, and he was the one that rewrote this little phrase, and the pursuit of happiness was his wording. But please listen to what Samuel Adams, the father of the American Revolution, said. The utopian schemes of leveling redistribution of the wealth and the community of goods, the central ownership of all the means of production and distribution, are as visionary and impractical as those which vest all property in the crown. These ideas are arbitrary, despotic, and in our government, unconstitutional. One of the things that is critical to understand is that the protection of our property rights is critical to this pursuit of happiness. John Adams said, all men are born free and independent and have certain natural, essential, and unalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, in fine, that of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. John Adams was one of the committee that wrote the Declaration of Independence, and what he says is your right to control and own your property is one of the critical elements in this pursuit of happiness. I believe that something else, we talked about the Creator being a tenant we may not sacrifice. I think, obviously, the issue of life cannot be in any way sacrificed. We have to be people that stand up for life. Let's move on. That to secure these rights to promote natural law. The purpose of government is to protect the individual's ability to obey the Creator. That's what government is for. Let's move on. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. What's being said here is it is the right of the people to establish or remove governments because God-given authority rests only with the people. That's why it has to be done. This is why when we get the Constitution, those first three words are so important. We, the people. Now let's go on. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. If you're constantly changing government every time somebody doesn't like something, you don't have the protections. I think in the time that the United States Constitution has been in effect, there have been 37 different constitutions in Italy. I think there may have been 18 different forms of government in France. So what our founders are saying here is, listen, people, you don't want to be changing governments every other week. You don't want to be having constant overthrows. And you know, this is what I've heard. This is my opinion, but I've heard people say, you know, some political, on both spectrums. When George Bush was president, I heard people say, man, I just wish somebody would shoot him. Or, you know, or Barack Obama, man, so I just wish somebody would, you know, be done with him. I don't. As much as I don't like those policies, I'll tell you what I hate more, and that would be anarchy. As much as I was not particularly personally happy for Barack Obama to be elected president, One of the most beautiful moments in past history of America was the day George Bush showed up and Barack Obama comes up on the stage and the most powerful man in the world becomes a civilian, and this man comes up and in an orderly transition of power. Whether you like the person coming in or going out, that is a beautiful thing to watch. It's something the world never thought would happen. That's why George Washington showed up for John Adams' inauguration 2 hours early. Because the world said, that man will never lay that kind of power down. And he said, I'll show them. And he showed up 2 hours early. And ever since that time, it has been the practice that the outgoing president shows up at least 2 hours early to show the world, this is what we are all about. Whether you like him or not, that is so much better. And that's what our founding fathers are saying. We didn't do this lightly. This isn't something we thought up last night. And he's going to go on then to say that you don't do this lightly, and according as experience has shown, that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. What he's saying here is, you know what? It would be better to suffer than to allow your nation to fall into this kind of anarchy, this kind of overthrowing of government. Suffer as long as you can stand it, is what he's telling us here. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, this is a critical phrase, it is their right, it is their duty to throw. Why is it their duty? Because man's ultimate duty is to obey God. When government has brought you to the point that you no longer can do that, it's not just your right, it is your duty. We must obey God rather than that. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient suffering of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former system of government. At this point, I'd like to say that our founding fathers had a very healthy distrust of democracy. Now, the word democracy, as you'll see here, became a buzzword, a smokescreen in the early 1900s because some of the word liberal and some of those words were falling into real examination. And there were people who were very unhappy with some of this progressive movement at that time. So Woodrow Wilson was the first to say, World War I, this is the world to make the world safe for democracy. Democracy became a buzzword, but our founding fathers had a very healthy fear of democracy. They felt that democracy was that we should be a government of laws and not by the whims of men. And in pure democracy, what you have is mob rule. Half plus one, and you can do whatever you want. So they believed that without law, there could be no liberty. John Locke wrote extensively about when you have the right to revolt. Democracies are full, their direct participation of the masses. As it says, they become unwieldy, they become inefficient as the population grows. The masses don't keep themselves properly educated. So at this point, I think it's important just to throw that in. Now we're going to focus on an idea that we've lost in this nation. He says, the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. Now, listen carefully. I don't want to get too screwy here. But I do think there's something, a lot of times on the 4th of July you hear, yeah, Declaration of Independence, no king for America. That's not what this document says.